Hello, hello. This is Lisa, Salty Sunshine Book Club review. I we just reviewed The Last Party by A.R. Torre, and in between reading our book club books, I read other books, and I'm gonna start reviewing the books that I read in between the book club picks. Our next pick, which we're reading now, is The Wedding People by Alison Espach. And I was given a book for my birthday. It's called All Fours by Miranda July. And it's a New York Times bestseller, which I kind of a little shocked because I gave it 3 stars. Um, I guess, different tastes. Other people like it. I am over 40. And so this book is about an unnamed character, which is odd. They didn't give the lady a name. She's 45 years old and she's going through the changes, her perimenopause and, midlife stuff. And as someone over 40, I do not relate to this book whatsoever. Um, so with that said, it was a New York Times bestseller, and I guess a lot of people liked it because it won a Goodreads award too. Um, so I was excited to read it. I just finished it, and I just have to say, it's strange. I felt like it was an aimless story. It went nowhere, in my opinion. I enjoyed parts of it. When it started, I liked it because it seemed, she was bold and she made some funny statements. But overall, I think the book should have been named Masturbation Station because that's what she was. Okay, so this is a little synopsis. A semi-famous artist announces her plan to drive cross-country from LA to New York. 30 minutes after leaving her husband and child at home, she spontaneously exits the freeway, checks into a nondescript motel, and immerses herself in an entirely different journey. So basically, she sells some script or some line to a whiskey company. They pay her $20,000, and she wants to use that money recklessly. She wants to just splurge and have a good time with it and spend it. So she decides she's going to go to the Carlisle in New York City and stay in a really nice lavish hotel and see friends and do that. Initially she was going to fly, but after back and forth, um, I don't know who brought it up. I don't know if it was her friends or her husband, but they said, "Why don't you drive? It's part of the," or she brings it up because they had a conversation and she's like, "Why don't I drive? I'm not I don't really drive long distance. That way I can enjoy, the time." And so she drives, but she doesn't get far because she exits a freeway. She's in, I think some sort of car wash, and this young guy named Davy, they lock eyes and he's looking in the window and she sees him. Long story short, she stops somewhere and stops at the hotel. I mean, she's barely driven at all. It's like a little suburb outside, maybe 30 minutes from her house. So she stops at this motel. She goes in there and she pairs up again with this guy, Davey, that works at the Hertz. And he's younger than her, much younger than her. And she becomes obsessed with him. And you would think they're going to have an affair. He's married to this lady named Claire, and she just becomes obsessed with him. So she starts hanging out with him every day. And so, backstory, she opens up the book also saying that her grandmother, that's 55 years old, threw herself out of a window and she managed to do it while inside a garbage bag. This is what I mean. It's like, it's silly. The book seems silly and not believable to me, if that makes any sense. I like real stories, and even if the stories are weird, if they feel like they could possibly be true, this seems like so not true. 'Cause her grandmother's 55. She throws herself out of a window in a garbage bag, and then her aunt did the same thing, but not in a garbage bag. But basically, the point is that women, once they reach 55, 45, 65, they become so depressed, and the menopause ruins their life, and they want to die. And that's basically what the book is saying, which I don't agree with, even though perimenopause starts anywhere between 35 and 50. And I know it's so hard and more people should talk about it, which I think that's happening now, but I feel like back in the day, that's why the midlife crisis divorces in the 40s, I think has more to do with women in perimenopause than it does with men in midlife crisis. Because when you think about it, why do the men divorce their wives? Because they think the wives hate them, and the wives they change so rapidly because of perimenopause. But no one says, listen, this is perimenopause and this is what's happening in my body. It's not you. It's this is what we can do. This is what I'm going through. I feel like if more people did that, they would have stayed married, because I think the guy thinks the woman hates him. The woman thinks she hates the man, but it's not that. It's the body changes that everyone goes through. It's like the itchy skin and the irritability and the mood swings and the loss of hair and the weight gain and everything else that comes with it. It's not talked about enough. So I definitely think that's why everyone ends up divorcing in their 40s, late 30s. So basically, that's the premise of the book, that she's 45 years old. She's in perimenopause, but doesn't know it. And so she locks eyes with the young guy that works at Hertz. She becomes obsessed with him. She then seeks out his wife named Claire, which is a interior designer. And she goes into her workplace and asks for her specifically and wants her to work on, she's in a motel, a cheap motel, and she spends $20,000 with this Claire, which is the wife of Davy, to remodel her motel room. I mean, it's just bizarre. And so apparently it turns out really beautiful, the sheets, the curtains, the flooring, the scents, all that. And she stays there for the few weeks that she's supposed to be in New York. She's lying to her husband the whole time. She's telling her friends that she couldn't make it or something happened, but she does tell her one friend Jordy, that she talks to and is very close to. She tells her the truth, and she's talking her through it. And every step of the way, she's telling her friend Jordy, and Jordy's trying to advise her on her next steps. She has a child named Sam, and this is another part, and this is just my personal opinion. Obviously. But so her son Sam, she's married to this guy named Harris, and he's like a music producer, and they have a child, and he almost dies at birth. And basically, I forgot the name of the condition she had, but she was bleeding, and it took weeks and weeks or months for the kid to be okay, and he should have died. But he survived, and she calls him a they them. But he's only in second grade or something. So it's almost like weird. The whole thing is bizarre. I just think that the vibe for me of this book is very bizarre to me. And it's almost like they want to throw in just everything that's against the norm and stick it all together, and it doesn't have any rhyme or reason, in my opinion. I know a lot of people love this book, but this is what I gathered. So she's haunted by excuse me. She's haunted by the experience of childbirth and almost losing her child. So she thinks about it a lot. She gets flashbacks. So that's one part of the story as well. So as she gets closer to this kid, Davy, he refuses to have he's having an emotional, mental affair with her and spending every afternoon with her. But he refuses to have intimate physical affair. So they don't have sex. And there's scenes in the book, like she at one point um she's in the bathroom and she opens her legs and he takes out her bloody tampon, and that to her was like the best experience. It's very odd. I just think, and again, being someone that's over 40, I think, and I've seen it with people that I know and friends, there are some women that, they'll go to a club or a strip club or something, and they act a little more wild than they would if they were 30 and 20, a little, there tends to be this thing over 40, especially over 50, that they kind of just think it gives them the right to act louder or crazier or tell men they like their ass, or I don't know, just be more sexually suggestive, but in a cheesy way. I think, like, for me, I would never act that way. I would never want to act that way. I don't have this inner urge to be silly. I don't want to look silly. I'm all about being sexy and doing what you want. But why is what you want, quote unquote weird? Why do you have to get weird just because you're older? I don't follow that path, so it's just odd. It's very odd. So he confesses to her that his mother. So one day she every day she goes and she waits for him in the lobby of the Hertz rent-a-car where he works. And then they go walking or they go back to the motel and they just lay on the floor and they do all these weird stuff and they talk. So one day there's an older lady and the older lady tells her, "Take a walk with me." And it's his mother. So the mother is apparently very outspoken and has no restraint, and she tells her, "I can see why you're enamored with my son. A lot of people are, but just know he's married and he has plans and blah 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 blah." So the mother tells the unnamed 45-year-old that that her son is not, he has boundaries and he's very controlled because she had her son sleep with her friend a while ago before he was married to get experience so he wouldn't be a loose cannon out there just having sex with everyone and being irresponsible. So her son was having sex with this old lady when he was young, and it's so gross. And then so she tells the Davy, like, "Your mom told me this," and he's like, "Oh, I can't believe she told you that." And she's like, "Well, that's kind of like child abuse." And he's like, "Yeah, they did it for 2 years, so they're basically in a relationship." And it's just so later when the time is up because she's supposed to go back home. She goes back home and she's super depressed and she's literally obsessing over this kid Davy, and she just can't stop thinking about him. And she goes back to the motel and she leaves like signs of a chair, and she goes back. She can't help it. She keeps going back and she wants to see him, but she never sees him until the end of the book. He ends up moving out of the place to another area, and she's just obsessed. So the one time she goes back to look for him, she runs into this lady that owns an antique shop, is the same lady that was having sex with him when he was young. And she feels so close to the lady, and the lady's also way older than she is because it's the Davy's mom's age. And she ends up having sex with her, thinking of him. And the detail is so graphic, and it's, for me, not my cup of tea. That's not what I want to read. It's not what I enjoy. It's very, very graphic. It's like soft porn. I would say this book is a little bit of soft porn. The details of the sex, to me, had no place because it didn't fit along with the story. Usually, you don't want to watch a movie that's just all violence and there's no story. It's the same with sex. If there's sex, it has to add to the characters and the story. And if it's just mindless, endless sex, it's like, what are you watching? It's like you're watching porn. So I feel like that's what this book was. It was aimless sex scenes and no real substance of the characters and the story. So she goes back home. She won't have sex with her husband. They just grow further and further apart. And it's weird because one day she kind of like tells him she wants to have kind of like an open marriage type of thing, like stay married but be with other people. And he flips out, but then they kind of come together and they start having sex, her and her husband, Harris. And you would think, like, why can't they just work it out? I mean, it seems that they have good sex and chemistry and they're getting along. But then she wants to venture out again, and he finds a girlfriend. And then he tells her, "Well, we won't have sex anymore since I have a girlfriend." And she's like, "Okay." But it's so weird. It's like, that's not what an open marriage is. Don't you stay together, like, and be with the person and other people? But in this case, they're just roommates, legally married, and he has a girlfriend. And she goes and gets herself a girlfriend. So apparently she's just bisexual and maybe leans more towards being lesbian. Like, she just wants to be with women, which is fine. But why? It doesn't just say that. It's just the plot is like not there. It's just like, what are you guys doing? Like, and she's like, "No, we don't want to get divorced because we don't want to break the fam." They want to redefine what that means, and that obviously doesn't work. So it's just weird. It's weird. Um, and then at the end, the girl breaks her heart, the girlfriend that she finds, and dumps her. And then she goes and runs into Davy somehow, or talks to him somehow, and he invites her to go to his show. I guess he's a dancer. So the whole time he has like this, he works at Hertz, but he loves to dance on the side. And he has a show in New York, and he invites her to go, and she goes. And there's a part in the show that resembles kind of like the motel room she remodeled. And she starts crying and it makes her feel free and she can always be herself in that motel room in her head. So that's basically the premise. I mean, I get when you're older, especially for women, your body has all these changes. And as people, just not even men or women, people change and you start questioning life and all these things. And that's okay. It's just, you don't have to get weird. It just, for me, it seems like people think it gives you a license to be odd and to lie and to be perverted. And it doesn't, in my opinion. It just doesn't give you the license to turn into a complete weirdo. It reminds me of when these kids like that start their acting career or singing careers when they're young and they're kind of lost at some point and they turn to drugs, they turn to this, they turn to that. And it's almost like that. It gives me that kind of vibe. Like just because you feel lost doesn't mean you have to be weird. And I think you can be lost and find your way and enjoy every day and inner reflect and do all that stuff without becoming perverted. It's not a license to be perverted. To me, this is what this book sounds like. But that's the book. Some people love it. Some reviews sound like me. They did not enjoy it whatsoever, and it's less of a story and more of a sexual weirdness going on. And other people absolutely loved it. They couldn't get enough of it, and so I think it can go either way. You might love it, you might not like it. I gave it 3 stars. It was fine. I liked some parts of it, but otherwise I didn't love it. So that's my review. Let me know if you have any questions. See you next time.